What do you think most pastors struggle with? I've been in ministry for a little over 20 years. Some of you have been in ministry longer than that. So you know that being a pastor, working in ministry, working in church comes with lots of struggles. But what do you think the number one struggle is? It's not faith, probably. I sure hope not. Expectations, I think that's a big one. We could probably name hundreds of things, right? But the more I've thought about it, the more I've reflected on my own time in ministry. I was a lead pastor for 13 of those years. And now that I'm working with churches, all over the world and interacting in these coaching sessions and really becoming really good friends with all these pastors, I think the number one struggle is focus. Focus. Do you feel that maybe? Or maybe you don't, but maybe you just wouldn't define it that way at first. But focus is hard. There's so much going on. It's kind of part of the job, like how we focus though, how do you focus, right? When so many things are fighting for your attention. Here comes Sunday, and then there's the tragedy, and then there's the wedding, and then there's the staff thing, and then a volunteer went off the rails, and the budget doesn't feel great. There are so many things that have to be in focus for us as pastors. Even with all that, though, I watch pastors, every day, and I love this, just trust God so deeply. They pray faithfully. They preach with such passion. But like somewhere along the way, right, leadership starts to feel very heavy in a local church, and maybe heavier than it has to or than it should. And I think one simple reason is because everything feels important. If that sounds familiar to you, this conversation is for you. And it really starts with a conversation around something that you might not expect, goals. It's a conversation around goals. Many pastors, and listen, I'm going to raise my hand for this. I was one of the people who did this too. Many pastors kind of avoid goals on purpose. Like I said, I was a bit like this. Goals feel very corporate. I came out of corporate into ministry. I spent a decade working in consulting in the marketing space before I entered into ministry full time. And we had lots of goals in the marketplace. But to bring that into the church, I don't know, it just felt very corporate. It felt kind of clinical in a way. Goals can feel dangerously close to measuring things that only God can do, which seems like, I don't know if we should even do that. Should we set a goal around something God is supposed to do? And I think those concerns probably actually come from some good theology, right? We know that God is responsible for changing lives, that the Holy Spirit is the one that produces the fruit, not us. And by the way, the church is not a business. I believe that wholeheartedly. So all that's true. But there is a quiet tension within all this stuff. And it's a tension that often, a lot of times, we as leaders can't fully name. Because when churches avoid goals altogether, you know what kind of happens? I think clarity sometimes slowly starts disappearing. And the reason is because everything becomes equally important. And it's hard to have clarity on what's important when everything is important. Meeting times fill up, calendars get real crowded, preferences get very loud for you. And then leaders, right, you, me, we find ourselves reacting instead of intentionally leading. And that pressure is building, right? And it isn't because we're doing too much necessarily. It's often just because we're not sure what matters the most right now. So here's some very positive news for you, okay? Goals don't replace your mission. Goals move your mission forward. Almost every church that can, right, can articulate its mission. You can do that. You can at least say it, even if you don't believe it's happening. You know what your mission is. Fewer churches can explain how they know that the mission is coming to fruition. It's a rare church sometimes, that it feels like at least, that can articulate clearly the strategy, the plan that is moving the mission forward. Your mission answers kind of the question why we exist. But goals clarify what we are intentionally kind of moving towards in this season. And that distinction is pretty important. I think it really matters. Because without goals, your mission can just stay aspirational. But when you attach goals to it, leaders now are forced to align decisions and energy and attention all around that conviction that comes from the mission. So here's what goals do, right? They don't end up replacing faith at all. They actually steward the responsibility that God has given us. They don't control your outcomes, but they focus your leadership. They focus our leadership. Now, let me be very clear for a minute, okay? Goals, they do not produce spiritual fruit, okay, by themselves. Goals do not guarantee transformation. Goals don't reduce people to numbers either, okay? They don't do any of those things. But what goals do is something incredibly important. They focus attention. And they help people like you and I, leaders and teams, decide what gets the most time, what gets our best energy, and just as importantly, what can wait until next week, next month. They give people like you, pastors, permission to say no without feeling guilty about it. Not because something is wrong, but because it just doesn't deserve the focus in this season. That kind of clarity, it doesn't increase pressure. You know what it does? It relieves a lot of pressure. And if you would like to relieve some pressure, hey, who doesn't? Goals can help you do that. So what are the right kind of goals? You've heard about SMART goals and things like that, okay? Let's talk about it just within the church context for a minute. Like healthy church goals, they're not about size, and they're certainly not about comparison to other churches or other people's goals. For you, it's just about movement in your mission. That's literally all it is. A healthy goal is moving your mission forward. That's it. So people may be taking first steps of faith or baptisms, as a visible response to the gospel, or engagement beyond Sunday attendance, new leaders being developed and released. Those aren't corporate in any way, right? Those are discipleship realities, not corporate measurements. And so when goals like that start to exist, what happens too? Prayer becomes like really specific. Leadership becomes so much more intentional. And as I said earlier, a lot of pressure can start to lift. So, and here's some other good news. You probably should think smaller than you might think you should around goals. I think this is where a lot of pastors get stuck, right? We start thinking goals mean complexity. Maybe you've heard the phrase BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goals. That's a marketplace thing. The idea, and this has been around for 2 decades, maybe at least. The idea being, though, if we set some like gargantuan, ridiculous goal, even if we get close to it, we've gone way further than we probably would with a realistic goal. I don't know. I've got opinions on that, and I think it's probably true, and maybe in the marketplace that works better than the church space. But I know when I was in the church space, well, I'm still in it now, having a big, audacious goal that I didn't even feel was possible, in some ways we would say it's good because it reminds us that God's the one in charge of outcomes and we have to depend on Him. But this job is hard enough without failing in the goal too. And so what if we just start a little smaller and didn't make it so complex? Like, for instance, with our dashboards, instead of having like dozens and dozens of targets and endless tracking, what if we just had a couple of things that were directly connected, right, to the mission? Maybe one thing in this season that's directly connected to the mission, like one clear mission-centered aim for a season. It could be for a month. I love thinking about it for a quarter, for a 3-month season. If we could all agree upon and focus on one thing in a season that aligns aligns our preaching, our planning, our priorities, man, can you imagine how much further the mission might be able to go? Because that's what clarity can do. So here's my kind of encouragement to you. Don't start with all the metrics. Just start with some clarity. Like, get together with your leadership team or your board or whoever helps you think and just kind of ask the question, what is the one thing we are intentionally aiming for right now? What is the one thing? Now, the mission is a big thing, right? But pick one thing in the mission, right? And all of our missions are the same, basically. We use different words, but it's the mission of the local church, right, that God gave us. So is it around engaging new people in your church? Is it around getting people who are newer to take a first step? Is it about second steps? Is it about groups? If you're probably listening to this in January, and January is a big group launch season for lots of churches. Is it around groups or classes or invest and invite? I mean, whatever it may be, just pick one for the season. And again, you can define the season. I love quarterly, and just pick that one thing and aim everything at it right now. And again, not forever, and you don't have to do it perfectly, but just be faithful around that one thing during this season, right? God is the one responsible for the life change, not us. But as leaders, when we are clear about that mission and about our direction, we're really stewarding God's a gift to us, the local church. And when we do that, it's almost impossible for the results not to get better.